Hello, my name is Jim Cooper. I'm a historian of the United States, and I'm based at York St John University. My research asks questions about the American presidency and Anglo-American relations, and I'll be touching on some of those issues with you today. Thank you very much for watching. It's a real pleasure to be part of the York Festival of Ideas. So, what we're talking about today, we're just talking about special relationship. I'm going to talk then a bit about the history of electioneering. I'll be making some comparisons between then and now. So, comparing the relationship we have between Trump and Johnson with that of Reagan and Thatcher. Also, then we'll be talking about Margaret Thatcher's election as Prime Minister in the UK in 1979, and the following year Reagan's election as President, and then look at their re-election campaigns, so for Thatcher in 1983 and Reagan in 1984, before going on to share some of my conclusions about this research with you, about the idea of Americanization of political campaigns, but the Thatcherization of the Republican campaigns in America. So what then do historians say about the special relationship? Well, very broadly, historians ask questions about Anglo-American relations as to what drives it, what shapes it. I mean, can you even call it special? What's special about it? We all have views on Anglo-American relations and the idea of a special relationship. What do they do? How do they study it? Well, they look at maybe, is it shaped by common interests? So wars or missions or that kind of thing. So look at maybe the special relationship was born in the Second World War and continued during the commonality of purpose in the Cold War, maybe, and then re-emerged again during the War on Terror. Is the special relationship about institutional collaboration? So regardless of who's in charge, who's in the White House or Downing Street, it's all about intelligence sharing or cooperation at summits, or the State Department works very closely with the Foreign Office, that kind of thing. Or is relationship driven by sentiment? So often, when a prime minister goes to America for a visit, or a president comes to Britain for a visit, when they have one of their dinners, there'll be speeches and there'll be references about the American Revolution. There'll be references to the British burning down the White House during the War of 1812. Or is it about shared values? Shared values is what determines or drives Anglo-American relations, belief in freedom and democracy and that type of thing. That's very much what Winston Churchill would have you believe, I'm sure, when he talks about the shared purpose of the English-speaking peoples. Or is it personalities is what makes Anglo-American relations special, or sometimes special, more special sometimes than other times? So historians and just general public often think about Franklin Roosevelt and his relationship with Winston Churchill, or the relationship between Jack Kennedy and Harold Macmillan. Or sometimes the Reagan and Thatcher relationship seems more like the archetypal example of a special relationship. Or is it Clinton and Bush, and then or is it then Bush and Blair? Are they examples of a special relation? They're seen as very, very close relationship, a very good example of close Anglo-American relations, for better or for worse. When we talk about electioneering, or the history of it, the United States has really been a global leader in political marketing since the Second World War. So they've brought about ideas such as photo opportunities, telephone canvassing, direct mailing, especially the use of television. These techniques is very American. Their techniques have been shared with and adapted by the rest of the world. We shouldn't really underestimate Britain's own contributions to the development of electioneering techniques. Is our very own Stanley Baldwin, in the 1920s, when he was Conservative leader, who pioneered the fireside chat as a campaign device. It wasn't Franklin Roosevelt's fireside chat, which was the first of that kind, where he'd address the American people over the wireless. Everyone would gather around the wireless by the fireside. Also, during the 1970s, 1980s, the Conservative which really adapted these American techniques, especially led by the political advertisers Saatchi, and the work of people such as Harvey Thomas, who'd worked on Billy Graham's Crusades, the big evangelical preacher in the United States, who worked on his crusades and his take his message out to the American people, or helping to organise his rallies and so on. And Thomas becomes like an advance man for Margaret Thatcher, the Conservatives, help set up their set piece, showpiece events like party conferences and big speeches on campaigns and so on. So as promised, but then and now. So nowadays, some people have said that we've kind of gone back to the 1980s in some regards. And so, how does it compare the emergence of the Donald and Bojo with the emergence of Reagan and Thatcher? Well, Trump and Boris Johnson, of course, you could argue that they rode a populist wave into power after around 2016, 2017, and so on. So Johnson, of course, is very much the face of the Brexit campaign in our European referendum. So the idea of taking back control was, of course, the big famous slogan. Trump's had a similar one in America, make America great again. So it's like a nostalgic message to voters. And of course, taking that message to voters, but taking back something that's almost been stolen from them. And of course, Johnson just won a big majority last year here. And of course, the slogan there was "Get Brexit Done." So almost like a sequel slogan, if you will, to take back control. And of course, Donald Trump is going to use the slogan "Keep America Great" in November. And so we could be going from our MAGA hats to our CAG hats. I'm sure that will be happening. Also, of course, Reagan and Thatcher, how do we compare them nowadays with the 1980s? Well, just how have Johnson and Trump rode a populist wave, kind of anti-elite wave. Reagan and Thatcher come to power in comparable economic circumstances. There's a real sense of economic decline in the West, and they're both offering free market and monetary solutions to issues about lack of economic growth, high inflation, and so on. The basically saying, well, the ways, the policies we've all adopted the Second World War, this Keynesian interventionist approach to the economy has stopped working, so we need to try something new. Reagan and Thatcher, of course, are also wants to revive national confidence and national prestige. They're much keen on that. But we also need to think very carefully about just saying they're the same, that Reaganism is the same as Thatcherism. They're both shaped by distinct institutional national circumstances. So you know the message and the philosophy of Reagan and Thatcherism is arguably the same about individuals rather than we, like individual emphasis, or having importance of entrepreneurial spirit of people rather than government being important in the economy. And the importance of markets and incentives, that type of thing. But how it plays out is differently in the national context. So, for example, there's monetary policy in Britain very broadly, quite crudely really, high interest rates are used to reduce low inflation, whilst in America, high interest rates are a consequence of efforts to reduce inflation, to control the money supply. Well, high interest rates are a commonality. Also, of course, in America, Reaganomics, as it was known as, they built up huge deficits following his tax cuts, which we could never have done in Britain because the pound just doesn't equate to the dollar in terms of its significance or attractiveness of people buying up currency and so on. So there are differences between the two. So in terms back to electioneering then, what I will say is that even if the philosophy was the same, the policies were different, but because the philosophy was the same, or very similar, the message is very similar between Reagan and Thatcher. So in 1979, Margaret Thatcher wins the premiership. She had the Conservative Party win the general election. And it's very much a campaign based on emotions and values, not specific policy. It's all about economic regeneration, reversing decline. Now, this campaign really begins much earlier than 1979. It starts with those posters that are put up everywhere by the Conservative Party. The famous Labour isn't working posters, or education isn't working, Labour isn't working, that type of thing. So obviously going after Labour on issues about employment and other public services and so on. But also, of course, it's all about emotions, all about values and general direction, about economic decline, reversing it. The Conservative Party manifesto was famous, very brief, very short, it's very light on detail. This campaign, obviously, it worked, it was successful. Thatcher became Prime Minister. It was followed closely by the Republican Party. And so they kind of had a sense of the type of themes they wanted to play out in their own election year in 1980, even before Reagan was the nominee. They even went as far as to basically borrow or use a TV advert, for example. So there was a British TV advert where an athlete was winning the race, but then started losing the race because being weighed down by high taxes, high regulation, high bureaucracy, and so on. And in the In Britain, the Conservative Party it was a British, the athlete represented Britain, but the Republicans adapted it, and obviously the athlete represented America. The Republican Party were also so impressed that they had an 80-minute presentation by the architects of the Tory victory. So Thatcher went over to America, delivered a presentation of how they ran the Tory campaign. And the Republican campaign, or Reagan's campaign in 1980, was very much with a focus on the economy and how to reverse decline, just like Margaret Thatcher was. Then you get to the re-election side of things. So in 1983, Margaret Thatcher, she wins re-election, obviously, arguably helped by the Falklands War, although there is obviously evidence to suggest that the tide of public opinion in the economy is kind of turning already. Anyway, basically, Margaret Thatcher wins the 1983 general election, and it's very much an election framed about the past versus the future, or the past versus the present and the future. And so there's a political broadcast where it shows images of the winter of discontent, with grim sounding music, and then people talking about how great Margaret Thatcher has done. And there's a poster done by Saatchi and Saatchi which says, "Britain's on the right track, don't turn back." So it's very much the idea of staying the course. In terms of foreign policy, Margaret Thatcher makes clear that everybody wants nuclear disarmament. Nobody likes nuclear weapons, but you need to negotiate from a position of strength. So you get peace through a position of strength. The Republican Party are watching this again very closely, and they even had people on the ground observing this and talking to Conservative HQ about exactly how you're doing this, what are you trying to accomplish in this campaign. And they wrote a detailed report of the Republican National Committee, which was shared with the White House, which very much, and there's a quote, it's quoted, some of it's quoted on the slide here. And it argues that based on what Thatcher's done, incumbents, in this case Reagan for America, must take the high road. They must emphasise their successes and the need to make sure the elections a referendum on whether the country is going to stay the course. And needs to say that there are no short-term solutions to difficult issues about unemployment, inflation, and so on. But actually, it's a long-term project. They need to stay the course. They also adopted the peace through strength message by saying the Republican Party and Reagan were the party of peace, whereas the Democrats, because they weren't as strong or tough on foreign policy, tough on communism, they were essentially the party of appeasement. Margaret Thatcher's victory in 1983 gave the Republican Party a real basis for optimism. In the White House, they were very, very optimistic because of what Thatcher had done, that Reagan could win a second term. And Dick Worthing, who was Reagan's pollster, is quoted as saying, actually, we are watching this very closely. We're very interested in how Margaret Thatcher's themes play. So it's the idea of what themes has Margaret Thatcher used, and just like in 1980, we're going to look at those themes and adapt them or use the same themes for our own election. And it worked. Ronald Reagan wins by a huge landslide in 1984. He wins all but one state. He's up against Walter Mondale, who's Jimmy Carter's vice president. It's very much the framing of the past versus the present and the future. It's quite simple, because you could go back to the failed Carter years, or you can stick with Ronald Reagan and have the morning again in America. So just how Thatcher contrasts Britain in 1983 with 1979, Reagan contrasts the United States, 1984 and 1980. Now, Reagan very famously asked the electorate the question in 1980, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Well, he kind of does it again through his adverts. So he talks about, the very famous adverts, very idealistic, lovely image adverts of it's morning again in America. And there's adverts about economic recovery, national pride, saying how people are buying jobs, homes, cars which never been able to afford before. Talk about the accomplishment, lowering inflation, lower interest rates, and so on. And the message being, why would you want to return to where we were less than 4 years ago? So again, framing the past versus the present. Also in terms of policies, get really in detail of policies where Reagan now, he's taken on the idea of Reaganomics, which previously was almost like an insult to him, that it's just Reaganomics, it's not proper economics. He uses it now almost like a badge of honor, and he compares Reaganomics with Mondalenomics. So basically stick with Reagan, and his economic policy will go back to the old failed ways under Walter Mondale. where rather than Reaganomics, where you cut taxes through growth and less government spending, you Mondanomics, you raise taxes. And this very famous advert which lines up in two columns what Reaganomics does and what Mondanomics does. And each time Reaganomics leads to a positive thing, while Mondanomics leads to you raise taxes. So it's going back to the idea, do you want to go back to the past where you had high taxes? Or do you want to go stick with Reagan and have lower taxes, growth, and so on? So Reagan just crushed Walter Mondale in that 1994 presidential election, winning 49 states. So how then, what early conclusions could we make then from this? Well, for about 40 years, really, electioneering techniques were very much associated with American politics, and they heavily influenced British campaigns as they did anywhere else. And Margaret Thatcher's election victories in 1979 and 1983, they are very much a model, though, for the Republican Party in terms of like the message you can give and the themes you can use in broadly parallel economic circumstances. So whereas the Conservative Party, they're adapting the latest innovations from America for their own campaigns, the Republican Party are adapting how the Conservative Party are adapting these techniques, but also crucially the message, what they're using to get across using those techniques. So it's not just a one-way transfer from America to Britain. This is actually a multiple ways of transfer. It goes all the way. So the techniques go over to America, go from America to Britain, and then the message and the techniques go back from Britain all the way to America. So whilst rather than us talk about this being a case of Americanization, I argue this is more like a Thatcherization of American politics or American political campaigns during the 1980s. But just so you know, we've concluded our ideas there. Just to let you know on a few things, hopefully you'll see embedded in the slide, but also in the description of this talk, there is actually a survey. And just takes a couple of minutes to complete it. I'll be very grateful if you would complete this survey, or if you just if you would be fantastic. All it is just based trying to gather a response to see what's been the impact or the benefit or the significance of this talk. So has it changed your mind or understanding or improved your knowledge of Reagan and Thatcher? All response will be anonymous, but you would use the data for purposes of something called the Research Excellence Framework, or the REF. In terms of how we measure the impact of our research or how effective we are sharing or engaging the public with our research as well. Also, there's a list of some references there, just of some specific quotes where you can find some specific quotes in literature or in primary sources, but also if you're interested in the full paper version of this talk, it's available in the Journal of Transatlantic Studies. It's a fantastic journal. Recommend it for everyone. But I would say that because I'm interested in transatlantic studies, but it really is a good journal. So I really just say thank you very much for watching this talk. It's been a real pleasure being part of the Festival Ideas. If you want to know more about what we do at York St John, please do get in touch if you're interested in what we do in history, American studies, or war studies. There's some links on the slides for Twitter or for the website or for our course and so on. And do feel free to email me if you have any more questions or anything about this talk or any other research that I do. Thank you again for taking the time to watch this. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope that you are well. Thank you.